During a recent congressional hearing about the failed assassination attempt on Donald Trump, Christopher Wray, the Trump-appointed Republican FBI director, said that the FBI had not determined whether Trump was hit by a bullet or merely shrapnel, and this in turn has publicly triggered MAGA Republicans and Trump himself, and we have to talk about it. But before we do, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. Before we do, as a reminder, if I sound strange, I'm not feeling well, so please bear with me. So Christopher Wray, the Trump-appointed Republican FBI director who continues to serve in that capacity under President Biden, kicked up the MAGA hornet's nest when he told MAGA Republicans the truth during a public congressional hearing about the injury to Trump's ear. This is what he had to say.
I think with respect to former President Trump, there's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that that hit his ear. So it's conceivable. Although, as I sit here right now, I don't know whether that bullet, in addition to causing the grazing, could have also landed somewhere else.
So again, Trump and MAGA Republicans have been saying since the assassination attempt that Trump took a bullet. As a matter of fact, Trump says that he took a bullet for democracy, which of course is not true. Even if he did get hit with a bullet, he was attacked by a registered Republican whose motivations are currently unknown. But Trump, of course, is doing everything in his power to spin this assassination attempt to try to create some sort of groundswell of sympathy and support for him. But Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, says actually the investigation is still ongoing and we're not sure if he was hit by a bullet or by shrapnel. Now, this is just a question of fact, right? It shouldn't really trigger anybody. It was still an assassination attempt. It was still awful, and Trump was still injured. But because Trump has to bend over backwards to try to maximize his masculinity, and the machismo surrounding him, he, of course, was very much triggered by this. So this is what he said on Truth Central. He says, FBI Director Christopher Wray told Congress yesterday that he wasn't sure if I was hit by shrapnel, glass, or a bullet. The FBI never checked, but he was sure the crooked Joe Biden was physically and cognitively uneventful. Wrong. That's why he knows nothing about the terrorists and other criminals pouring into our country at record levels. His only focus is destroying J6 patriots, raiding Mar-a-Lago, and saving radical left lunatics like the ones now in D.C. burning American flags and spray painting over our great national monuments with zero retribution. No, it was, unfortunately, a bullet that hit my ear and hit it hard. There was no glass. There was no shrapnel. The hospital called it a bullet wound to the ear, and that's what it was. No wonder the once-storied FBI has lost confidence in America. Again, very upset because, as far as he's concerned, it undermines the heroism, it undermines the bravery, it undermines the gravity of the situation if he was hit by shrapnel or glass instead of a bullet. And it's not just Trump. MAGA Republicans everywhere are up in arms about this. I want to play some clips. This is a MAGA Republican congressman being interviewed by Newsmax. This is what he had to say in the aftermath of Christopher Wray's testimony.
Christopher Wray yesterday in his testimony said that he was not yet sure conclusively whether or not Donald Trump's ear was grazed by a bullet or shrapnel. Newsweek went on to run a report. The initial title was "Donald Trump Might Not Have Been Shot After All." His son, Donald Trump Jr., pushing back, quite angry about that headline. Your reaction to that, is that careless? Does that minimize the severity and danger of what happened?
Well, there are those that are going to try to minimize anything to do with Donald Trump and are going to try to hurt him. He was obviously shot. He heard it. They even showed the trajectory of the.
So again, this is Jeff Van Drew, a MAGA Republican congressman. He is also emotionally invested in the idea that Donald Trump was hit by a bullet. I'm agnostic on it. The initial reports, by the way, I should just say, the initial reports did not conclude that it was a bullet. Then the reports in the second wave of reporting seemed to suggest that it was. Again, as far as I'm concerned, it was still a harrowing attack. It was still something to be taken seriously. It really shouldn't matter unless, of course, you are a profoundly insecure person. And so much of this is predicated on this idea that you, quote unquote, took a bullet for democracy. And again, other MAGA Republicans are really invested in this as well, including Pat Fallon.
And by the way, I bet you Christopher Wray hasn't talked to Dr. Ronnie Jackson, the Admiral Jackson, who's my best friend in Congress. I talked to Ronnie, and you know what? Dr. Jackson also examined President Trump. He was with him for a week thereafter, after the shooting, and he said it was a bullet wound. So either Wray doesn't comment on it, but don't parrot the hard left narrative that it was some kind of shrapnel. What was it, a rubber band, Ray? I mean,
No one said it was a rubber band. It could have been glass. It could have been shrapnel from the bullet. We just don't know. That's all Christopher Wray was saying, the Trump-appointed Republican director of the FBI. I will also point out, because we're going to talk about Ronnie Jackson, or Ronnie Johnson, as Donald Trump said, he's not an admiral. He was retroactively demoted to captain after his retirement because he was investigated. And it turns out he engaged in all sorts of misconduct in his capacity as an admiral. So the United States Navy, the Department of Defense, demoted him as a consequence. So he is not Admiral Jackson. He is Captain Jackson at best. He's also a lunatic, right? So this is a guy who used to be a respected physician. He was the physician to President Obama, and then he served in that capacity when Trump became president. And then after leaving Congress, he has just, again, he's mutated into this openly devout, incredible, and I do mean like as in lack of credibility, MAGA Republican. He is not happy about what Christopher Wray had to say. He was interviewed by the Fox Propaganda Network after Christopher Wray's congressional hearing, and this is what Captain Ronnie Jackson had to say.
Absolutely not, Larry. This is absolutely ridiculous that he would make a comment like this. This degrades any level of credibility that this man may have had after years of weaponizing the FBI and the DOJ against the president. It was absolutely a bullet. I examined it. It was the track of a bullet. It was scooped out in the just as it would be in the track of a bullet. It had the telltale other damage that is associated with it. All the surrounding tissue in the ear was swollen and edematous. His ear looked like a wrestler's ear.
A wrestler's ear. Well, wrestlers aren't shot by bullets, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. Again, totally open to it. Christopher Wray didn't seem to be opposed to the idea to conclude that Trump was shot in the ear by a bullet. He's just saying that the investigation has not concluded this. And so I'm not sure why Captain Jackson is being so defensive about this. Of course, he also makes this ridiculous claim that the FBI has been weaponized against, he says, the president. But of course, Donald Trump is not president. Donald Trump is the former president. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. is the president of the United States, head of state, head of government, commander-in-chief of the very Navy, which demoted Ronnie Jackson from admiral to captain, and is also the most powerful man on earth. Donald Trump is somebody who wants to be all those things and used to be those things, but is currently not. And I will remind people that the Department of Justice under President Biden investigated President Biden, released a damaging report, the Her report, about President Biden, which has been political fodder for Republicans against Biden. It doesn't seem like the DOJ is being weaponized. They successfully prosecuted Hunter Biden, President Biden's only living son, and secured a conviction in court. President Biden had all the legal power in the world to preemptively pardon his son on day one of his presidency, before the prosecution, during the prosecution, after the prosecution. He hasn't done it. He had the authority to fire the Trump-appointed special counsel investigating his son. He didn't do that either. So even though he had all the power in the world to snap his fingers and truly weaponize justice in his favor, he chose not to do that. And his son is potentially facing, potentially spending the rest of President Biden's life in prison. That doesn't sound like weaponized justice. The Department of Justice is prosecuting Henry Cuellar, a Democratic congressman, in an election year. They successfully prosecuted Senator Bob Menendez, a powerful incumbent Democratic senator, also during an election year, and secured a conviction as well. For every Republican or former Republican who has been prosecuted, there is at least a Democrat or former Democrat who has been prosecuted as well. So it is completely baseless and dishonest to suggest that President Biden's DOJ is weaponized. Now, again, I say that Ronnie Jackson is not handling this well. He just released a letter, rather he wrote a letter that the Trump campaign released. Oh boy, Trump campaign just released another letter from disgraced Dr. Feelgood Ronnie Jackson, in which Jackson goes off on Christopher Wray. As a matter, let's take a look at it. As the former physician to the president for Donald Trump, I continue to monitor his health and well-being. Let's see, I've reviewed President Trump's medical records from Butler Memorial Hospital, where he was initially evaluated and treated for a gunshot wound to the right ear. Again, that was the initial assessment. The FBI has still not concluded that. It may be the case. It may not be. You guys just need to chill. During the congressional hearing 2 days ago, FBI Director Christopher Wray suggested that it could be bullet, shrapnel, or glass. There is absolutely no evidence this was anything other than a bullet. Congress should correct the record, as confirmed by both the hospital and myself. Director Wray is wrong and it's inappropriate to suggest anything else. These guys are just triggered. All Wray was saying is that the FBI has not determined this. But it was brought up on Piers Morgan's show, Piers Morgan Uncensored, by Wajat Ali. And even Piers Morgan agreed, hey, maybe they should just release the full medical records following Trump's assassination attempt, or the assassination attempt against Trump, and kind of dispel these concerns.
And then also, as of yesterday, I think the American people deserve to know more information about what happened. Christopher Wray of the FBI said, we don't know if a bullet hit him or if it was a shard. Is it a bullet? Is it a shard? What's the hospital records? I think Donald Trump should release the hospital records from that night. We don't trust Ronnie Jackson or Ronnie Johnson, whatever he calls him, his doctor, who's no longer a doctor. He said, oh, no, I treated him. Give us the hospital records. What's the treatment? What's the diagnosis? What's the injury? How's he healing? Give us more information and do more of an investigation as to how the Secret Service, especially that team at that time, bungled it up from before to the shooting to after the shooting. We deserve more information.
All right, Elizabeth, I mean, is it unreasonable for that information to be made public? I mean, it was interesting that the FBI director, Wray, yesterday seemed to cast some doubt over whether Donald Trump's ear injury had been sustained by a bullet or by something else. Would the best way to clear that up just be to release the medical records?
I can't speak for Donald Trump, but I agree. I think in the interest of transparency, the American people deserve that when it comes to what happened to him, which.
There you have it. It seems that Piers Morgan and members of the Trump campaign are also supporting the idea of the full release of medical records. And I will say in conclusion that the FBI is seeking to interview Donald Trump as part of the investigation into the assassination attempt. We'll see if that happens. But there you go. So again, Christopher Wray, the Trump-appointed Republican FBI director, kicked a hornet's nest. He triggered Donald Trump. He triggered MAGA Republicans. They are in full meltdown mode because they think this minimizes what happened to Trump. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't. It really doesn't. I mean, his life was still in jeopardy. He was still shot at by a sniper, a registered Republican. We don't know what the motivations were. This is still something very serious, but it just goes to show how fragile and incurious and fact allergic MAGA Republicans really are, because they, for some reason, perceive this to be a game changer. And it is interesting to me that they're that fragile. Let me know what you think in the comments.